Hello and welcome everybody to this Build It webinar. I'm delighted to say we've had over 600 people register for today. I can see a huge number of you already with us live, so I think we can start now. I'm Chris Bates, editor of Build It magazine, and today I'll be taking you through our masterclass on designing your dream home. We'll be delving into what it takes to design and realize your self-build or renovation project, and referring back to Build It's own self-build journey in creating the self-build education house, which I was deeply involved in as project manager. Before we start, a big thank you to all of you for joining us and to our panelists and our sponsor Kloeber for help making this webinar happen. And our agenda for this session includes finding an architect, creating a design brief, developing the design, key decisions before you build, a focus on window design, and then there'll be a Q&A at the end. And along the way, I'll be chatting with two leading experts about how to plan and specify your bespoke home. Before we begin, just a little housekeeping. If you can't see the full slide, you might find the best viewing mode is side by side. You can select this in the view options at the top of your Zoom window. And then if you still can't see the full slide, you might need to select fit to window. Questions will be answered at the end, but please submit them via the Q&A button below. You can upvote questions you like by clicking on the thumbs up. So if you really want that answer, thumbs up it and it will more likely get covered. And if you have any technical feedback, please use the chat function at the bottom of the window. Just to introduce our panelists, obviously I'm here, but with Opinder Liddar, who's director at LAPD Architects and the design brains behind the Build It Education House. Opinder specializes in self-build and renovation. He's a regular expert at the Build It live shows and recently completed his own self-build annex. We'll also be joined later in the session by Kloeber's Matt Higgs to talk about a key design decision, windows and glazing. Both of them will be here for our Q&A at the end of the session too, so be sure to post those questions via the Q&A button and we'll get through as many as we can. So, what is the Build It Self-Build Education House? Well, it's a first for any magazine, a real-life home built solely to inform and inspire both our readers and self-builders across the country. The Build It House is an educational hub located at Graven Hill in Bicester. Graven Hill is the UK's largest self and custom build development, with over 900 self-build opportunities available. The Education House is designed to arm you with the tools you need to successfully complete your project on time and on budget. It's open to the public, currently by appointment only. And as you tour the house, you'll have a real life project and plenty of helpful infographics to inspire you and provide a reference point for your specification and budgeting decisions. And here's a quick video to help you get a taste of the house and our build journey. So now seems like a good point to welcome our resident architect, Opinder Liddar. We'll talk more about the house itself shortly, but first up, we're going to look at how to find the right architect, perhaps more importantly, how to work with them effectively. Hi, Opinder.
Hi, Chris.
Now, we often talk, Opinder, about recommendation as being the best first port of call for people. But whether it's an architect, contractor, or other supplier, if you know a professional has done a good job for someone else, it stands to reason they can do the same for you. But are there any other routes people should consider?
There are. There's many routes, and taking part in these webinars is part of that. Most of our work does come through from referrals, but then I'd say that the back of that is the website and events, as well as reading magazines. So do look around and get yourself together a short list of people that you'd like to invite. to help you realise your home.
Absolutely. So there might be other routes, like perhaps you found a contractor, you've worked with a contractor previously and they could recommend someone, or you can acquire a building site of a house that's caught your eye, for example. All sort of good ways to find a recommendation in. And there's also things like the REBA and ARB websites, Architects Registration Bureau. They've got Find an Architect web searches, ASBA for the Association of Self-Build Architects, which is made up of designers who specialize in one-off home building projects as well. It's well worth a look. It's worth mentioning, I think, as well, there are alternatives to architects, such as package home companies who bundle up the design and build into one neat package. Some self-builders will find that route easier to manage than perhaps using an architect and a separate main contractor, but Opinder, I can imagine you'll naturally recommend going down the architect route. So what do you think the main benefits are of using an architect?
So we're trained in design. We spend an awful lot of time just doing design work. It takes 7 years before you can call yourself an architect and be let loose on projects as well. So we do understand design. There's a lot that goes into psychology, understanding people, not only just on the aesthetics for aesthetics' sake. So we do look at proper site analysis, sun orientation, as well as the environmental aspects of buildings as well. So there's a lot behind just design work. It's also about managing quite what could be a complicated journey and dealing with legislation as well, particularly planning and building regulations, and guiding you through, as well as setting up appropriate contracts with your contractors as well. So I think that's the value. Not only are we looking to inspire, but we're a solid guide through your journey with you.
Absolutely. And so when it comes to the first meeting that you might have with a client, what are you looking for from them?
So I'm looking to develop that relationship, develop trust. This whole thing is about trust. It's quite a long journey. So I could easily be involved with a client for a couple of years, from inception to completion of their homes. And like I said, the referrals then matter. So we stay in touch with them for many years to go. You know, we've got clients from 15 years ago who are still referring us. I still pop over to see their homes. So the first meeting, I'm looking in that start of developing that relationship to find out about the person, find out about the family setup or the individual, what makes them tick, as well as ascertaining what their key objectives are from the project. So we will cover things like functional aspects. Sometimes you need to work from home, sometimes you want an open plan lifestyle. Everybody's got their own tastes and what they want, and also understanding what they do like. Cost also comes into it. So from day one, we're talking about budget as well as what their desires are, and then just trying to make sure that we're managing that relationship between the design as well as the cost all the way through the journey. Other elements that would come into play are the time frame. So how soon do you want to have your house built, and when do you want to move in? And other aspects, particularly sustainability, which is more and more important these days as well.
And I imagine part of your job is helping people rationalize their time frame and their budget and things like that.
And their ideas. So yes, be over ambitious at the outset, and we're here to help rationalize those ideas into something that's tangible that you can see. And sometimes a client could be composed of a number of people, and what we have to do is find the right solution that they're all happy with, and that's managing the likes of one person versus another as well.
So what you're doing together really is kind of developing the design brief in partnership, and I think it's a good opportunity to just have a quick look at the brief for the education house. And the full thing actually stretched to several pages, I think, but here's just a taster of a few of the points. And we were looking for a 3 or 4 bed design, so our plot's on Graven Hill. We wanted to conform to Graven Hill's general design code, although we didn't have to go through their plot passport process in the same way, and we'll explain that a bit more later. We were looking for an architecturally interesting design for a compact plot. We wanted to showcase a range of products so we can share our experience of them with self-builders and renovators. And in particular, we wanted to future-proof the project. So we had an idea to build a basement and an attic. I mean, I don't know if our sort of brief was unusual for you. Was it a bit more detailed than the standard brief you might get from a self-builder?
it was unique. It had a commercial aspect to it, as well as trying to make sure that at the end of the day, it would still become a home for somebody as well. So, but usually we would cover this kind of elements with our clients as well, including the future proofing and long-term aspirations as well.
And so you're looking for them to come to you with lots of ideas in the first place, or?
Not necessarily. I mean, we're here to create ideas. So there's a desire to build your own home. It could be that we as the architects are there to realise it into something that you would like. So we spend a lot of time looking at what clients like. It could be artwork, it could be pottery, it doesn't have to be buildings, but just getting an understanding about what you like and where you're coming from. So as a practice, we're quite unique. We don't have a set design style. The houses are specifically designed for the client's needs, and you shouldn't forget that you're the client and this is your home. So really, you should have it how you want it to be.
Yeah, and so you don't necessarily need to come in knowing exactly what you want. And actually, that can be quite unhelpful if you don't have a plot yet, for example.
It can.
To contextualize the design.
Yes, and sometimes the briefs can be too prescriptive. So again, it's an element of, okay, understanding everything that you're looking to achieve, but you've got a professional on board with you. So let them come to you with something that will hopefully inspire.
Excellent. And then the next stage, you've got your brief. You come up with maybe a couple of architects you're interested in, and you'll start to get sketch schemes coming in. And here's an early design that you provided to us in response to our brief. What was the sort of main thrust of what you were trying to achieve here?
So I had a good understanding of the accommodation that you wanted to achieve. Now, this is unique. At Graven Hill, every plot has a plot passport, and it defines a zone where you can build and certain rules. So there are rules about the height, where the house needs to sit onto the plot, and then otherwise it's fairly free after that. So started sketching out, always start with a bit of paper, start sketching out a layout, and then start looking at the massing that comes with the building as well. Now I'd favour pitched roofs for this particular plot. We had certain aspects that needed to be taken into account. So it was a corner plot. So I wanted the design to turn that corner, but also each elevation had opportunities in terms of views. So this face that we see here does turn the corner. There's a great outlook over a brook and neighbouring properties, as well as the other side of it is looking more onto trees and open parkland as well. The height, which in this case was set at 8.1 metres, then determined what the form started to look like. So I started to sketch out a pitch roof, but obviously going across that whole span would have resulted in something that was quite flat and looked more like a 70s or a 60s building. So started to break up the form and introducing a number of gables, which then helped to turn the corner and repeat that on one facade as well.
Yeah, that absolutely lends a lot more interest to the design as well. And if we just look quickly at some of the key features that we picked up on when you presented the design, we loved the apex glazing, for example, where it sort of sets a bit of contemporary flair. The corner glazing you've already mentioned, overlooking woodland and brook at both stories. We like the idea of the porch, just a little cover. Great for when you're walking in with your shopping bags and things like that. Get rid of the rain hitting you. And we really like the mix of claddings as well. So got some timber cladding and some render. It just brings a lot of character to the contemporary design. If we have a quick look at the initial floor plans as well that you came up with. So we'd obviously specifically asked you for a 3 or 4 bed. And if you're asked for a 3 or 4 bed, you're probably going to design a 4 bed because they tend to be sold, houses tend to be sold by the number of bedrooms. But what we actually found when we looked at it was maybe we've been a bit over ambitious, and we could do with having one less and giving a bit more room to each one. On the ground floor, initially you had a study, which is a really great feature in all the homes, but what we decided with the education house was we want to give visitors that sort of inspiring wow factor entrance. So we got rid of bed 1 in this picture and the study and turned them into a vaulted ceiling, didn't we? All the way up from ground floor to the top. The other thing to note is this is a rectangular floor plan, and you've kind of alluded to this already, but at Graven Hill there are build zones. And this particular floor plan, the back edge, sort of to the top right of the plans you can see here, was just sitting outside of the build zone, which was actually angled on one side. And we hoped initially that we could get that through Graven Hill because we were still conforming with their overall metre squared they would allow, but as it happened, we had to absolutely conform to that build zone.
Yeah.
So we had to change the design. And so these elements all come together, and we worked together on it very closely, didn't we, Opinder?
We did.
And this is the revised ground floor. So similar feel, the big kitchen diner, living room, and you'll notice that both the living room access points have got sliding doors. On the hallway side, it's pocket doors. You can see the feature staircase there on the floor plan.
And the angled wall, which actually adds to the dynamic of that building now as well.
Absolutely. So it's actually a key part of the aesthetic now, isn't it?
Yeah.
Here's the first floor. So you can see that we've got now a galleried landing. We've got 3 bedrooms rather than 4. Quite a sizable main bathroom in the middle left there. And we actually found during construction that it was a bit bigger than we really needed. So we moved that wall just slightly further up the page here to give a slightly bigger first bedroom. And, you know, by and large, Opinder, it's probably best not to make too many changes to design, isn't it? But sometimes you can get away with it.
Yes, yeah, but you can do it. I think by the closer that you get to being on site, try not to make too many changes, but you can, it is possible.
I think just moving a stud wall as we did, a couple of hours work is not really going to set you back too much, but other things might. And of course our basement, so this is the full floor plan, so it's a full-size basement with our plant room, which is kind of becoming more and more important in modern homes, and then a big exhibition space where we actually have a home cinema as well. Moving up to the attic, so at the rear of the house there's enough room there for a playroom or potentially a future bedroom or something like that. We've actually left it unfinished at the moment, but that's part of the future-proofing journey. Now, Opinder, at this stage, self-builder gets their floor plans back, and they may or may not have gone into too much detail with the architect about how they want it. What happens if they're not particularly comfortable with the design? Can they walk away at that stage?
So, like anything, you know, if you're not happy with anything, you can move on and pick something else. But we never present a scheme to begin with as a fait accompli. So it's an evolution of design. So hence it's called a sketch scheme design at the outset, and it's really a first stab at gathering the thoughts from that outline brief into something that's tangible. It's obviously not going to be 100% from day one, but you don't want to be a million miles away if you've looked at carrying out the briefing exercise properly. So it can happen, you know, sometimes it doesn't stack up, but that's very rare. And again, like I said, it's a sketch scheme, so it's an evolution of that design. So we would normally present it to a client, leave it with them for a few days. They would then come back with some comments, and then we would revise that design. And we allow for that within our fees as well, because we understand that this is part of the design journey to help the client realise what actually really does matter. And some of those more ambitious desires, whether through cost or through planning matters, may not be attainable. So you might have to just compromise in some cases. But we want that vision, and we want that spirit to drive through into something that is still an exciting project. And
Yeah,
carry it
it's not that people will face extra design fees if they want to tweak it. Or
no, they shouldn't do. No, architects should allow for, you know, looking at that, developing a scheme design. It's not just, here you go, here's one plan and move on to the next stage. There should be plenty of consideration on both sides to develop that before you then move into planning, and certainly looking at cost control as well.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned cost control. I mean, how does that work with your architect? How much help can you expect them to provide in terms of keeping on top of your budget?
Well, as well as being a good designer and producing a good design, the budget is as important. If you haven't got one without the other, it's not going to happen. So as a practice, we make sure that we do a fairly detailed cost plan during the design stage. So certainly before we commit to planning. Unfortunately, at a lot of events that I do, people come along, lovely schemes, but nobody, the designer, has not spoken about budget at all. And they've got planning approval for something that they just can't afford, which is soul destroying, and you've lost money and time on it as well. So I think both need to go hand in hand.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, if you're not getting that from your architect, you should push for it, shouldn't you?
Definitely, yeah. And then you might want to change.
Okay, then we'll move on now to a few renders, 3D renders that you provided to us shortly before putting in the planning application. And I mean, these really helped with visualizing what we were coming up with, as well as a SketchUp model you did for us, where we could actually sort of fly through the design a little bit and move into the rooms. So these show some of the tweaks that we made quite well. You can see here the porch is now extending all the way across with a walk-on balcony for the first floor bedroom. The wall is actually now flush all the way up, whereas previously it was staggered back slightly, which was an interesting part of the design, but we've actually kept the top right roof element
protruding
as well. So you've still got an element of that interest. Here's the west and south elevations, I think it is. And you can see the corner glazing working really effectively there, as well as our mix of claddings. We move around to this is the south and east, and on the east elevation, you'll see we've got relatively few windows and they're quite small. That's because we're next to a plot there. So we need to think about privacy and things like that. And then finally, what we call the money shot, really. This is the one we kind of put everywhere when we were designing the house initially. You can really see there the full scope of the design and how really aesthetically interesting it is, I think. But Opinder's, this is one way of visualizing things, but what other help should self-builders expect from their architect? Because sort of viewing 2D drawings and even something like this, it can be difficult sometimes to visualize the house properly and feel yourself living in it.
It is, yes. And these days, everything that we do is developed onto CAD. So 3D modeling is quite easy to do. And I think as a client, it's a basic requirement, because to read flat elevations and a plan is quite difficult when the software is easy to use. It can be orientated correctly, so we can see exactly what the sun is going to do at different times of the year, different times of the day. And it's a good design tool. So we would always do all of our designs initially with the SketchUp in a sketchy 3D to develop mass and form, as well as windows. And then you can actually position yourself anywhere within that model to have a look at what those spaces are going to be like. And ultimately, it's a three-dimensional thing that you're going to build, and the drawing should be presented in that way as well.
Excellent. And even at this pre-planning stage, we were already starting to talk to potential suppliers and things like that. You kind of need to do that now to start to get a sense of your prices. You've obviously got the budget control work from your architect, but this will help feed in. And
to make the most of their product as well. So with the ICF, we looked at glazed corners, the SIP roof, we looked at these protrusions that were coming through. So they understand it from early on as well.
Yeah, ICF being insulated concrete formwork, that's our walling system, and then SIPs is structural insulated panels, the roofing system. We'll talk about those in a little bit. But Opinder, I think you actually submitted the planning application for us, didn't you? Is that kind of the normal way that you would interact with self-builders?
It is, yes. So usually your architect would submit that application on your behalf. It's a bit easier at Graven Hill because these rely on plot passport compliance, so it is a bit easier. But elsewhere, it's not just the drawings that your architect would provide. It would also be followed up with a design and access statement, and that is an assessment of how the design relates to local plan policy and your justification for how it meets those policies. So it shouldn't just be the decision of one planning officer and their subjective view. It has to be actually tied to policy. And so that's quite an important piece that goes in with the planning application. Absolutely.
And self-builders who are getting involved in the planning stage, you can sort of arrange a pre-app usually with your council, pre-app meeting, where sometimes they charge for this. Some councils are more sort of flexible with them than others, but it's a good opportunity to talk through your ideas, maybe bring a sketch design with you, and just worm out things like what reports might be needed, such as flood risks or tree protection reports. Get some initial feedback if there's anything contentious about your design and things like that. Just helps set you on a path where you feel more certain that you're going to receive planning permission, although a pre-app is never 100% certain. Anyway, moving on, key decisions before you build. So I mentioned we were already talking to suppliers, and that's really essential at this stage. The design process doesn't stop at planning approval, basically. Early on, you need to be speaking to people, suppliers, contractors, to flesh out your specification for the core elements of the project. So you're thinking everything from structural systems to heating, ventilation, windows, doors, and more. Gathering all of this together helps you to sort of rationalize the design and gain more accurate quotes. Not to mention, a lot of it will be required for your building regulations application for things like the design stage SAP. So let's take a quick look at some of those key decisions on the Build It house, and we'll start with the house shell. And here's the Build It team at the time, all standing, enjoying the house shell of the Build It education house. You can see most of the windows are in and the roof tiles are ready to be installed. But let's start at the beginning. And one of our big goals was to add space and value to our scheme with a basement. And it's kind of amazing, isn't it, Opinder, that we don't build more of these in the UK. They're quite popular in Europe, especially on compact plots where you can actually gain 50% more floor space and leave your garden as a pleasant place to be. So in our case, we really wanted to show that is a value for money approach in many cases. And a soil survey confirmed that we did have clay soil as expected, and that would normally require some kind of deep or engineered foundations. And in fact, in this part of the site at Raven Hill, piled foundations are a common solution. So it's an engineered solution. And our contractor actually estimated it would have cost us around 48,000 to go with piled foundations. Instead, we paid £30,000 more to dig a gigantic hole and actually create a watertight basement shell ready to kit out. So for £30,000, we got 80 meters squared extra of living space. And here you can see the insulated concrete formwork starting to go up. They're building a blockwork wall internally there. That's a load-bearing wall, and blockwork's just a little thinner than ICF for internal purposes, so it gives you a bit more floor space. And here's the waterproofing. And Opinder, I think it's really important, isn't it, to bring your waterproofing specialist on board at the early design stage if you're doing something like this.
It's crucial now. So warranty providers are going to insist that you've got an insurance-backed provider and a system that goes into it as well, otherwise it won't be covered. So it is crucial that they're brought on very early, certainly as your architect's developing technical design. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think it's both the install and the products used that need to be insured. And in our case, we've used Surrey Basements for that. They were great at providing advice and information. And we've actually got several waterproofing systems. So we've got some tanking applied to the walls and the floor. And you can see as well the internal cavity drainage membrane, which is kind of an egg crate style thing that allows any water that does seep into the building to filter down below the membrane and go into some perimeter drains and then be pumped out by a sump pump. So it's a really robust combination of tanking and membranes and sump pump. We've actually fitted our basement out as a plant room and exhibition space with a home cinema as well. But you could leave it at a waterproof stage and finish it a few years later once your finances have recovered. Is that something you think, that sort of partial fit out, you think something people should consider more?
Definitely, and more clients coming to us with that approach as well. There's the Rolls-Royce dream, the Ford Focus budget. So we have to manage that with them, but it shouldn't stop you realising your ultimate home. So certainly fitting out the roof, fitting out basements, that doesn't have to be finished from day one, and that could be incorporated as finances become available. So whether it takes you a year or 5 years or 10 years, in some cases to actually finish the home, it's a lot easier to have built that watertight shell from the outset and then do the internal fit out rather than trying to extend later on.
Excellent. And we'll have a look now at the ICF walling proper. So this is at ground floor level. And we selected what Nudura ICF, so it's Nudura's system of insulated concrete formwork for the house superstructure provided by ICF Supplies. And ICF can be used both above and below ground, which was the key thing for us. It's a synergist solution across all stories of our house. It's becoming more mainstream, but there's no doubt masonry and timber frame are more common. And there are already many great timber frame show homes out there across the country, I think. So we wanted to demonstrate an alternative at the Education House. And ICF offers a number of benefits for self-builders. It's quick to build with, offers great insulation and airtightness as standard, and it lends that same kind of solid feel and acoustic performance you get from masonry. So you can do things like screw plasterboard directly onto the blocks rather than battening out, so you don't get those hollow sounding walls that you might do with some systems. And here's the walls being built up. And you can see fundamentally what you do is stack the hollow blocks and reinforce them with steel rebar. Then you brace and align them. You can see the green bracing system there. And then once you've got that all sorted, you pour the concrete in and you create a super strong structure. So here's the ground floor pour, being completed. And this is so after the ground floor was poured, we got the floor joists and our structural steels in. And we needed a bit more steel than we initially hoped, partly because we demanded such an open plan design from Opinder. And then we had the attic space as well and across multiple stories. And this is moving up onto first floor level. And you can see it's all building up very much like a conventional house would. Go back a second. And Opinder, I mentioned acoustic performance. It's something that maybe not all self-builders would consider straight away, but it can have a massive impact on your quality of life. So how can people account for that at the design stage?
It does. Well, I think self-built houses are better quality than what you would get from a developer anyway. So in covering sound, for instance, I'd expect that most self-builders would address that. So the posi joists area, you can put insulation between. I know in this one we used a thinner screed on top of that floor as well. But internal partitions would typically spec a plywood to the outer elements of those studs, and then plasterboard on top of it with some insulation between as well. So you don't have those hollow walls, or you can hear what's going on upstairs from downstairs as well. Absolutely,
and the solution we used was screed flow, the DB acoustic flooring, I think it's called, and it involves sort of an acoustic mat as well as the screed, and that actually allows you to do things like incorporate underfloor heating in the traditional way of embedding it into your screed rather than some of these other systems that are available. And then moving up, we went for a SIPS roof, so structural insulated panels. And this system can be used for the entire shell of a house, but part of our mandate for the Build It House is to show a variety of products, hence the hybrid. But the beauty of SIPS, I think, is that they're pre-insulated and engineered to deliver maximum performance in a very thin profile. They're also super strong, so they're great for creating features like vaulted ceilings and ready-made loft rooms, as you can see here. You can see the SIPS crew installing with one of our main contractors from Druitt and Hunt overlooking proceedings, and me taking the photo. And here you can see the advantage of SIPS. You see me just testing out the height of the finished attic space that we managed to create. Not bad, I think, considering an 8.1 meter ridge height. So they're fantastic systems, but the challenge came for us at the structural design phase. And I think one of the big issues was that we had different structural engineers for the walling compared to the roof, and neither was particularly keen to take responsibility for the junction between the two. So we probably could have avoided that quite easily by using a single structural engineer across the whole project, but it's a bit different when you're working with certain suppliers. But what are the boundaries, Opinder, with these sort of grey lines on technical decisions? Should you expect your architect to help you with that, or does it fall to other people?
Not the architect. So we act as lead consultant. So we're managing other consultants. It might be heating engineers as well as structural engineers as well. But a good project will work when everything is incorporated at the technical design stage. Try not to leave things that will be figured out on site, because you'll find that extra steel work or an opening or something else needs to be done, and that's only going to slow you down when you get onto site. So Graven Hill is unique in that they have their golden brick, so everything up to a DPC level actually has a separate engineer from anything that you're going to put on top. So on a lot of these projects, what we tend to do is appoint an overseer in terms of a structural engineer who kind of mediates between any other engineer that's involved, and it comes to one point of responsibility then as well.
Yeah, I think that's the crucial part of it, and actually that can work quite well across lots of different elements of your build as well. I'm sure that'll come up later. So let's quickly run through some of the external materials we chose, because these are big decisions. And to be honest, with the exterior, I found finalising the material choice quite difficult. And, you know, good suppliers will send you sample panels, but they're so much smaller than a whole roof or a whole wall. And I probably lost days staring at different mixes of roof tiles, cladding, render finishes alongside window frames and things like that, just to try and understand how they interact with each other. And obviously, Opinder's come up with a great design for us here, but how we interpret that design will have a big impact on the final result. So if we'd gone for different materials or interpreted how to build the balcony differently, it all could have looked quite different. So it probably means, Opinder, that there are occasions when clients make decisions and the house ends up looking not much like what you expected it to.
It can be, but as I say to all our clients, it's your home, not mine. So I might grimace afterwards, but it is your home. So long as you're happy, then I'm happy at the end of the day.
So it's kind of a partnership with this kind of thing. And
it's, yeah, we're here to give people informed decisions, but you don't have to take it on board. But yeah, it is a partnership, and we'll help in that decision making. And so things like the finished renders can certainly help, so you get a good appreciation of what that colour blend is going to look like. And
actually that helped a lot with the roofing, for example. So we went with a 3-tile blend from Dreadnought Tiles, and that was a suggestion from Dreadnought. And I was a little worried it might look a bit like a barn with that kind of blend. But Opinder's team produced 3D renders with different mixes so we could look at them together. And it really helped me realise that actually this was a great way to add character to a modern build. Is that something you'd often do for self-builders then?
On one-off houses, we certainly did develop the SketchUp models, and then as the design develops and we're getting more finalised, and often we'll run it through like the Lumion programs as well. So it kind of inspires clients as well, because there's still a way to go from the technical stage until you've moved in. And I've known some clients that have put it up on their walls, and it just helps them make those steps and make it feel as though it's becoming a reality a bit quicker.
Focus your brain.
Yeah.
I mean, the results are fantastic. The one thing I think with a 3-tile blend that we weren't quite expecting is how long it takes to do the blending, because you do that on site to get a natural result. If you pre-blend it in the factory, it might come out a little bit formulaic. So there's a lot of extra labour involved in doing that kind of thing. That did up our costs a bit. And you can see as well that we included some solar panels, nice in-roof sleek solution, much preferable, I think, to the version that sits on top of the roof, and obviously it saves you on roof tiles as well. Moving on, we went with the rain screen cladding solution, but we initially talked to Opinder about using maybe thermally modified cladding. You were the one who sort of pushed us towards something more like larch or oak. What was your thinking there?
It's a natural material. It works well. There's hardly any maintenance that you need to put onto it, and most of them are European sourced as well. So it made sense sustainability wise. It's a good product, and it will work and age with that property, particularly with the trees to one side of it as well. And
as I said, it's a rain screen format. So what that means is there's gaps between each of the slats. You can see there, I think they're 7 mil, and we've got they're battened out, and the battens are painted black, and we've got a black breather membrane behind as well. And it gives you this lovely shadow gap effect, which I think really just sets off the natural character of the wood. What was revealing, I think, about doing the cladding was there was a number of decisions we needed to make kind of on the fly almost. And, you know, I've got a couple of images up here. One is on the one on the left, taken in the rain, I'm afraid, so it's a bit funny looking, but you can see we chose to cut the cladding so that it lined up with the corners of the window, and that's actually helped us achieve that contemporary look. Then on the right, one of the big challenges we had was exactly how to finish the cladding around the window reveal, so the bit where you move from the facade down the side of the window and abut the window. And there's no sort of standard solutions out there for that kind of thing, so we had to sort of work that one out ourselves alongside Opinder and Kloeber, our window supplier. We've also installed the cladding in 2 different ways, so you can just about see that here. On the left, we've got the secret fix, and on the right, you can see a screw's about to go in, so that's a screw fix solution. And we did that so self-builders could compare and contrast what would work best with them, for them. So on the left, the secret fix takes a bit longer to do, so it's a little bit more expensive with the labour, but it gets a really clean finish. So it's about what works for your budget, what suits your style best. And some decisions do just have to be made on site. So you can see here, there's a mitered corner going all the way up. We couldn't actually fix the cladding right at the end into the ICF because it's insulation around the outside. So we came up with the idea, rather than putting a stop bead in, of having the battens slightly as close as we could get them to the end, and then creating a mitered corner with another shadow gap. And I think it works really well. Quick look at the modern render. So this is a silicon render from K-Rend, self-coloured in the top coat, so it doesn't need repainting. And it costs about £40 per metre squared for us, which is double what you might pay on standard render. But the lifetime costs and the maintenance are super low. It's typically just 6 to 15 millimetres thick as well, and it can be direct applied to the ICF. Features like that give you a thinner wall build-up, which can ultimately translate into more internal space. Opinder, are you seeing more people using this kind of modern low maintenance product?
Yeah, definitely, and throughout. I mean, this year's an exception, but most of the time lifestyles are fairly busy, don't have time to look after your building, let alone everything else that's going on. So young or old clients, they're asking for low maintenance. So that, yeah, you're not cleaning the windows, you're not repainting the windows all the time, you're not having to repaint your render, so that everything stays looking fresh for decades, really. Yeah,
and it's not just the maintenance, it's the cost in the future as well. So don't just immediately bulk if something is a bit more expensive. There could be a good reason for it, and if it works with the rest of your budget, then it might be best to go for it. Yeah. Moving quickly onto the sliding doors, and you can't really have a big kitchen diner without a big set of glazed doors, and here I am opening them. We've gone for aluminium sliders from ID Systems, which offer super slim profiles, as you can see. And that really helps to maximize views and daylight. And we plump for these over bifolds, because in the UK, most of the time you keep your doors closed. So bifolds have a lot more frame material, so that obscures the view and reduces the amount of light you get through. There's a step up to the doors for waterproofing, but we've got a flush threshold internally with just a few millimeters difference between the floor track and the porcelain floor tiles to avoid grit getting into the track. You need to make sure you have all those kind of details ready, don't you, Opinder, for the floor build-up and things like that, because they can have follow-on effects for other parts of your project.
You do, and especially when you're looking at level thresholds as well. So sometimes people want that paving to be exactly the same level as the internal level. And really that decision needs to be made when they're putting the foundations in, and even the level of that beam and block floor.
Fantastic. Well, thanks, Opinder, for your help in this section. We're going to move on to look at the window design, next section of our external materials. So I'm going to be joined by Matt Higgs, Director at Kloeber, which is a leading window and door specialist. And Matt's been advising self-builders and home improvers for over 10 years and completed a major home extension project himself just over a year ago, I think it was. So we'll just run through a quick introduction. So welcome, Matt. Thanks for joining.
Good evening. Hello.
Just quickly run through our own choice before we get into talking more generally. We went for engineered softwood for our windows and French doors, and we've got a funky front door from you as well. I'll change the slide so people can see that. And you were very involved in the whole process with us, weren't you? I don't know if that's partly because it was Build It's project, but how would you normally expect your team to get involved with a self-build?
Yeah, I think I was quite involved in the project, and I think you asked my opinion on quite a few things above and beyond the doors and windows, which I was quite happy to give, and that was really, really good. I think there's different levels of support that self-builders need, and we have to understand the customers and what's appropriate for us and how involved we get. We take a really consultative approach, and we've got a lot of experience of building, and you know, people ask us all sorts of questions, but you know, the real answer is we get as involved as the customer wants us to get involved.
Yeah, and I guess ideally you want to be involved from as early as possible as well.
I think so, yeah. It's good to be involved at the sort of early design stage, the planning stage, those kind of sketch designs that Opinder was talking about. And it's really good at that point that we can talk to people about standard products and some of the limitations on sizes and give them different options, and hopefully help them with their budget at that stage as well.
Absolutely. I think knowing what you can achieve with certain different projects just helps focus your mind, doesn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. So
what should people be looking for in a good glazing company?
I think obviously first and foremost the products. It's good to have one company that can offer the whole package of glazing products, so they can do all of the doors that you want, windows, roof lights, fixed glazing. It's nice to have one person that coordinates all of that and one person that's responsible for all of that. But I think as important as the products themselves is the service. So I think really it's massively key that you do your research on the company. You look at the history, you look at their reviews online. Reviews are a huge thing. You've got to see how they're responding to other clients and how they're going to treat you. So that's massively important for us, and that customer service side of things is huge. Look at the case studies, the kind of jobs that the company's done before, and hopefully you'll find a good fit for your project and for you.
I like the idea of the single point of contact. I think we mentioned it earlier as well.
Yeah.
It really helps make it easier to manage the whole process, and
That's
we
right.
know that one person's responsible or one company's responsible. We went for engineered softwood, as I mentioned, rather than something like aluminium, partly because it achieved the performance level we were looking for. So we've got double glazing to a good level of performance at a slightly cheaper price. But what other factors should people be considering when they're specifying their glazing?
Yeah, I think there's a whole host of things that people should be looking at, and first and foremost the aesthetic of the window, how it fits in with the style of the house and the design of the house. We looked at Opinder's design and thought that timber would look good with it. Timber's also got a lot of character to it. It's very strong. It's a natural material. It's sustainable. It's environmentally friendly. It's good for insulating values. But there's lots of other options out there. There's aluminium. There's Ali-clad, which is timber on the inside, aluminium on the outside. So I think the material choice is really important. The maintenance that you're going to have to do on a timber product, it's important to think about that, and it's not going to be every year like lots of people think. And if the environmental impact as well is very important, I think.
Yeah, and on the maintenance, I mean they're factory painted these days, aren't they? And they come with guarantees. I think can't remember exactly how long the guarantee is on these ones. Can you refresh me?
Yeah, so they're factory sprayed. It's sprayed 3 layers, microporous finish, so it lets the timber breathe. And it's a really, really good finish, really tough, really durable. So in the UK, it's going to last on average about 5 years. That's what we would say. In my experience, it's a little bit longer than that. But, when there is maintenance to do, it's very, very minimal. It's going to be 5 to 10 years. It's going to be a small sort of light rub down on certain small areas that might have a little crack in them, and then a quick paint over, and it's quite a quick and easy job. So it's not the daunting thing that a lot of people think it is. I think if people like timber and like the properties of timber and the character that it gives, I really think they should go for it and not be put off by any maintenance.
Well, I think I'd agree. And you mentioned the character of timber. Obviously, externally we've gone for a sort of grey-green kind of finish. Internally, we've got white painted, because you can have a dual colour with Kloeber's windows. So internally we've got white painted on the ground floor and the apex windows, and then an actual sort of see-through timber stain on the bedroom windows and the bathrooms, and that's where the warmth really comes through. Now, one thing I didn't really think about much before we went into specifying our windows was mixing and matching opening configurations can actually be quite effective. And is that something you're sort of proactive about with self-builders?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the way that the doors and windows open and close is absolutely imperative to get right, and that's how people are going to use these products in their house in their everyday life. So it's probably something that most people don't really think about that much until they start talking to us, and then we're saying, that's in a window, it's behind a worktop. Would you rather have the handle at the bottom there so you can reach it, because you're going to have to reach over? And this is in a bedroom. You're keen to get lots of ventilation in. Do you want to have a tilting window that just tilts in that you can leave open all night? And all of these different things that people may not consider. It's good for us to sort of throw them up in front of them, give them all the options. And yeah, most houses that we do have bottom opening windows, side opening windows, tilt and turns, and all different types of opening configurations.
Excellent. And we actually specified most of our windows off the structural plans to sort of avoid lead times a little bit and try and speed things up on site. Is that an approach you see a lot?
It is an approach we see a lot, yes. It's not without its risks. You know, it's chicken or egg. You either do it off the plan, get the windows made and hope that they fit on site, or you can build the walls on site, then come and measure up and then make the windows to those exact dimensions. So the less risky option is to wait for the walls to be built and then make the windows, and that could take 4 weeks or 8 weeks depending on the exact product that it is. But I think in your case it worked okay, and there was a few products that we left out until the walls were built, the sort of the tricky ones that you're showing there, the apex glazing and the front door as well, and that was a good decision, I think, that we did that.
Yeah, there was a sort of joint agreement between you, us and Opinder. It did work well. I think building something that complicated accurately is quite difficult. So measuring off plan is difficult there. But what do self-builders need to know to get their sites ready for the install day?
I think just the practical stuff really. Access, scaffolding, are the apertures prepared correctly? Are they the correct size? It's always good to double check everything. You know, check that there's nothing impeding the openings there, so that the installers can get to the apertures and get the windows and doors in. And you know, there are some challenges that we come up against, but we pretty much always get around them. But it's good to be prepared.
Absolutely. Any other tips, Matt, you want to give about glazing at this stage?
Tips, I think, you know, we were talking about earlier the company that you choose, and you know, obviously my company Kloeber I would endorse, but it's, you know, I think it's the right fit for the build, the right fit for the people that are doing the build, and going with someone that they feel really comfortable with, that's giving them good amounts of information, that's you know, doing what's best for them rather than what's best for that company. And I think getting them involved as soon as you can as well can really help with the budget and the design choices that you go with as well.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for that, Matt.
No problem.
See you later for our Q&A.
Great, thank you.
And if I could welcome back Opinder just to quickly run through the internal fit out just before we get to some Q&As. Welcome back, Opinder.
Hello again.
So the fit out is one of those areas where, you know, there's so much choice, and I think costs can creep up at this stage of a project. But let's have a look at some of the key choices we made on the Build It house. And the first thing was we wanted to build a modern smart home. And the great thing about smart tech is it makes your life so much easier. Our intuitive Nico system can control the heating, the lighting, the blinds in the bedroom, our AV, audio-visual, and more. And a good example of how it makes life easier is the all-off button. So when you leave the house, you can just press a single button next to the front door, and all the lights, the music, etc. go off. The Velux window in the vaulted hallway will close, and the alarm sets. So there's no worrying about whether you've left anything on inside the house when you're 2 miles down the road. It doesn't need to be expensive either. So an entry-level smart home system for the Build It house would have cost maybe only 5 or 7 grand more than a standard traditional electrical install. Our install is a bit higher spec because we wanted to show you some options, but gives you a sense that you can achieve this stuff for affordable prices. Opinder, you put together an initial electrical plan to help us get early quotes in, but the detailed design came down to Moss Technical. Is that the sort of standard approach?
Usually we would do a layout just to start off as the basics, where your sockets are going to go, the amount of lighting, you know, whether they're pendants or spotlights, as a basic start, which anyone can then price from. And then if you choose to go for a more sophisticated system like this, it's a good benchmark to start from, and then your specialist can build upon that as well.
Excellent. Moving on to our heating and ventilation, we've gone for quite an innovative system. And welcome to our plant room here. And Opinder, I think it's quite common now, isn't it, for modern homes to have a plant room?
It is, yes. And again, another crucial consultant to get on board early, because all of those pipes that you can see, they wind their way throughout the entire house. And so that has to work with your structure, particularly if you've got steels. The posi joists work well with those systems, but again, you need to get that on board with the layouts when you're in the technical design stage, rather than trying to figure it out when you're on site.
Yeah, and we've left them on display here in the plant room, but actually throughout most of the house, they're hidden in the posi joists, as you say, or in the walls and things like that. But it gives you a sense of what you can expect now. So the HPV series we've gone for is heat pump ventilation. Does what it says on the tin. It's a whole house heating and ventilation system, so you get fresh filtered air and a boost of warmth. There's a micro heat pump in the HPV unit to provide, so it can actually act as the whole house heating, and it can also provide some summer cooling. It's relatively new to the UK, but Total Home Environment specialise in this kind of kit. The ducting, as I say, is on display in the basement, but we've also showcased some different options. So we've got underfloor heating from New Heat in the bathrooms, for example, and a gas stove in the living room. And gas we went for rather than wood burning stove, because gas is a bit more controllable. So in a really well insulated house, it's easier to avoid things like overheating. Moving on to the kitchen quickly. And we wanted to achieve wow factor on a fairly normal self-build budget rather than blowing it all in one go, as some people do. And we found that a well-known brand, Howdens, offers several products that replicate the clean lines and quality of premium German brands without the price tag. So our contractors during the hunt felt very familiar as well with installing Howdens kitchens. So it was a great solution for us. And we've added a touch of glamour with stylish surfaces from the Granite House. So here's the carcassing being built and the finished result with in particular, the waterfall effect on the worktop in the central island unit. It really adds that touch of wow factor. Do you find, Opinder, that choosing kitchens is something self-builders are more comfortable doing themselves and they don't necessarily need to involve you in the process?
It's a relatively easy thing to manage. We would work out the relationship between the hob, the fridge and the sink, just to make sure that magic triangle works. But whether you've got double ovens, as you can see on here, or how many drawers you want, then that's quite easy to take up with the likes of Howdens or another kitchen designer as well.
And just quickly run through our internal doors. So we opted for Tigris oak fire rated doors for JB Kind, they were from. We didn't need to use fire rated doors everywhere, but they've got a much more satisfying feel to use than standard lightweight units. Some are side hung, but you saw there that some are pocket doors, so they slide into a recess in the partition walls. We've also got this glazed internal slider from ID Systems between the dining area and living room snug, so you can close off the space for privacy, but you still get the benefit of natural light. And then moving on to our feature stairs. This is in the vaulted hallway. And we initially were thinking of going with oak, just to sort of match with the doors, but Kloeber TSS, who designed our staircase, came up with the idea of ash, which is slightly cheaper, but gets a very similar aesthetic. And it really works very effectively. And we've actually got a slightly different variation on the theme going down into the basement. So this is finger jointed ash rather than the solid ash that you see on the left there. And it just makes it a bit cheaper. But it still gets a really wow factor result. And this could easily be a feature staircase in anyone's home. A quick tour now of the inside, and then we'll move on to our Q&A. And I know we're running a few minutes over, so sorry for that, but we will soon be answering your questions. So this is entering the house, looking up the staircase and up into the vaulted hallway. And you can see the amount of light and space and the feeling of wow that you get when you step into the builder house. That light fitting there, we actually kind of built ourselves with a 3D printer. Walking down through the hallway, you can see the double pocket doors on the left. On the right is the ground floor WC with a wider door for access. And then moving into the kitchen dining area. And again, filled with light, lovely views of the woodland to the right. And our lovely sliding doors. You can see it's still a relatively compact plot at Graven Hill. And then moving through into the snug, and there's our stove, a very contemporary design from Yotel. So that's it on the tour. So I'm going to ask now for our panelists to all join us. So Matt, if you could come back. Welcome. And if any of you do need to contact us or want to ask more questions, our contact details are here. But can I now invite Emily Smith, Build It's Deputy Editor, to join us and ask the first of our viewer questions.
Hi everyone. We've had quite a few questions about the ICF system, so let's start with that. One question that's come up a few times is relating to ICF and mortgage companies not liking them. Any advice regarding this?
Well, it sounds like one for me. As far as I'm aware, there is no real issue with ICF or any real alternative system with the specialist self-build mortgage companies, and that's the important part, going to a specialist. So go through someone like BuildStore, and those people, those lenders they work with are set up to accommodate the kind of products that self-builders might be using. And ICF has all the warranties and certifications it needs, and the lenders do accept them. So go through BuildStore and those kind of companies, and you should find that you can gain access to exactly the products you're looking for. Emily, another question?
Relating to the basement, how much should a self-builder expect a basement to add to build costs if it's included as part of the original design?
Enda, do you want to take that one?
I'll try. So ground conditions play a key part in this. So a basement in a chalk area could work quite well because you're not having to spend a lot on shoring up as you start to dig the hole. Obviously, in this case, I think it was made up ground, so they did have to sheet pile certain areas to hold the road up. Usually, I would say that the basement in a £1 per square metre rate is going to come in higher in terms of a fitted out basement than the construction that's going on up above, but not double or anything like that. ICF works quite well for basements. It's fairly simple to do compared to making it up out of block work and reinforcement and then pouring concrete, and then you're having to put layers of waterproofing on the outside and the inside as well. So it's definitely worth considering. It's probably the thing to do if your ground conditions are poor to start off with. As Chris was saying, if you're looking at a piling solution, then you may as well look at introducing a basement as well, because I would have thought that those costs aren't going to blow the budget in comparison to piling. And
actually, just to sort of be clear, with the Build It house, we spent an extra £30,000 over piled foundations to get to a weather-tight, watertight basement shell, completely watertight. So £30,000 for 80 metres squared of extra living space is not a huge investment in the grand scheme of building a new house. Yeah. It's massively good value for money, but you do need the right conditions to get that kind of value for money. So soil conditions, the nature of the plot and things like that will all come into play. But it absolutely can represent very good value for money. Emily, another question, please.
Quite a few people asking about the benefits of triple glazing over double glazing.
Definitely sounds like one for Matt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, firstly, I think there's a lot of myths surrounding triple glazing. Not all triple glazing is better than all double glazing. A good standard of double glazing generally will suffice with most builds. And some triple glazing is good. Some of it's not so good. It all depends on the size of the cavities within the glass. It depends on what kind of gas you've got in the cavities of the glass, and the thickness of the glass panes themselves. So, but the benefits of triple glazing, generally, if you go for a higher spec, will bring down those insulating values, so keep the heat in. It's also good for acoustics as well. So it stops the sound from traveling through because there's an extra layer, an extra barrier for that sound to be broken down. It doesn't come without problems. It's very heavy because there's more glass there. We used double glazing on the Build It house because we didn't need to use triple glazing. So it depends on the property, depends on what you want to achieve with the property, what products you're using, how much glass you've got there compared to the wall space as well. So there's lots of different questions to ask to see whether it's a right fit for that person and that project.
I'd agree with that, Matt. And I think also contextualizing it, like you say, in the whole house design is very important, because there's no point adding triple glazing to a leaky house anyway. And similarly, you know, if you're trying to go to a really high level, like passive house standard for your home, then you probably do need, in fact, you do definitely need triple glazing, but you don't have to go that high and get really good energy efficiency. The Build It house is a very energy efficient home, and it uses double glazing. So it's absolutely possible to get very low running costs without spending the extra money on triple glazing. It's just how far you want to go. Emily, another question?
What recommendations do you have for how to ensure that your architect develops a proposal that's likely to achieve planning approval?
Well, that's an Opinder question.
That is. So remember, it's your home. Planners are planners, they're not designers, and they're interpreting a local plan. So your designer, as well as you, need that inspiration in your home design, and within reason that it should stack up against those local plan policies that I spoke about, but have the gumption and the drive to really push it with those planners as well. If we left housing design to planners, it wouldn't be good.
No, well, that's how you end up with massive developments and things like that, where they all look identikit. And that is absolutely not what most of us are trying to achieve as self-builders. Emily, I think we can probably take a couple more questions. So what's next?
It's easy to spend lots of money on home automation, but which essential home automation features should self-builders consider?
Well, I mean, that kind of depends entirely on what you want out of your home, doesn't it? But there are some that are more standard than others. So controlling your lighting and your heating, for example, through your home automation system, that's likely to reap you some easy benefits in terms of making it easier to manage how you control your heating system. Some can even learn when you're in and out of the house and things like this. But I think starting at the basics, looking at how the systems can improve your lifestyle, enhance your lifestyle, and gauging what works for you on a value for money basis. So, you know, for example, I don't know if anyone's lived in a house where you had about 18 different switches to control all the lights from the hallway or things like that. You don't need that with a smart home. It makes things so much easier. There's just one panel with 4 buttons on, setting different moods and things like that. So it's really a case of going to the specialists, talking it through with them. But at the very least, make sure you get the infrastructure in place. That is absolutely crucial. So get the cabling in now, even if you can't afford all the bells and whistles right now. Get the cabling done and you can add those things later. Another question, Emily?
Would the architect and window supplier coordinate to ensure the future maintenance is up to scratch?
So we will look at the design. Often at concept design, we send things across over to Kloeber to have a look at, looking at pricing options, looking at what would be appropriate with them as well. So yeah, I think the sooner that you start bringing suppliers on board, once you've got a design that you're fairly happy with, the better the result, I think.
Yeah, I think there are elements of house design as well that can help if it's about maintenance. So things like where we've got the overhanging roof, for example, that would protect against rain and some sun potentially damage as well. So there are things like that that can be worked into a design. I don't know if you've got anything to add to that, Matt, as probably our last.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was definitely something that came into the equation when we were talking about material types and the design of the building and how timber would lend itself to it. And I think really, you know, maintenance is something for everything on the exterior side of the house. And yeah, we provide an operations and maintenance guide for all of our products when they're delivered, so that the customers know exactly what they need to do and when they need to do it.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Opinder and Matt, for helpful advice.
Thanks for having me.
Sure, you've inspired a lot of people here. And thank you to all of you for joining us, and thanks in particular to Kloeber for sponsoring and making this happen, and to all of our house partners on the Build It Education House. And Thank you for listening, everybody. You can find out more about the Build It House by visiting buildit.co.uk/ourhouse and book your visit as well. And really do come. It's a fantastic experience and you will get a lot of inspiration and advice out of it. I'm sorry we couldn't have time for all the questions, but please do know that we will endeavour to answer as many of them as we can by email if we couldn't answer them tonight. Thank you very much and good night.